Welcome back to the Expat Files. Tane Nix here. My guest today is a gentleman that I met just over a year ago at a very special gathering in Maryland, and he is just as witty and sharp and knowledgeable about a wide range of subjects. When you talk to him in person, they currently have, I think, the largest financial publication on Substack. Uh, Totaling some 300,000 readers and very happy readers, I have no doubt. I'm talking, of course, about the man that you know as the goggly-eyed green chicken, which is maybe the biggest coup in marketing history. And so, welcome to the program. Welcome back, Doomberg. It's great to see you.
My friend, great to see you again. It's been too long, and I will say it is probably the best $7 clip art purchase in history that we just recolored. But
I love
that's
it.
that's
I love it.
4.5 years and counting. It's been quite the ride.
That's astonishing. Yeah. I heard the story, and we don't have to repeat it here, but the idea of grabbing eyeballs with a cartoon kind of avatar has obviously worked out for you. But also, you got to look long and hard. I'm in the newsletter business. I read all kinds of financial research, and we met at a gentleman's place who's a titan in the financial publishing space, Porter Stansberry. And your success has been tremendous, but it's also well deserved because I think that you have some of the best insights and also the most articulate writing and speaking because you're such a fun podcast guest to talk to on various topics, not just the energy markets, which is ostensibly what you mostly focus on and is your real wheelhouse. So please, let's start with what you see as the most important things. But what I want to hear about is, and I think the big story that a lot of folks are just oblivious to, as North Americans tend to ignore what's outside their borders. There's titanic kind of shakeup going on in the world's finances, in the monetary system with the SCO and the BRICS recent meetings. Would you start there with some of your observations and research and just bring people up to speed? I think this is the most important story for people to know about, and then take it whatever direction you also wish.
Sure. It's timely discussion. We have, we have our paid tier for our articles, and then we have a premium tier that gets a monthly presentation that we work hard on. It's called our Pro tier. We call them Doom Zooms. And this month's Doom Zoom is called Losing India, what a united BRICS means for geopolitics and energy. And just put the finishing touches on the first draft. I'm probably going to lay down a recording later this week, and we'll publish it next week to our Pro tier. And it involves everything that you're discussing. So our view, so we pride ourselves on lateral thinking, and when you're a lateral thinker, you have sort of no emotional attachment to the correctness of your axioms. You just explore them because they're fun and interesting. And we call these mental models, where you assume a few things and then see where it takes you. And one of the things that we've assumed internally for some time now is that the world is in World War III. World War III started back in 2013, 2014, with the Crimea crisis and Putin's subsequent decision to sell down Russia's U.S. Treasury holdings and build up Russia's gold holdings, a decision made concurrent with China's decision to open up a physical gold exchange in Shanghai. And we think those two things are highly correlated. In essence, Russia and China have been slowly and systematically creating an alternative to the US dollar-led Western financial system, which has been in place largely since Nixon removed the US from the gold window, so 50 years, a 50-year regime, owning both the reserve currency and the quote-unquote neutral reserve asset, i.e. US Treasuries, at the heart of international trade, provides significant benefits to the US. Comes with some costs, of course, which we can get into. But by and large, our view is that the world is in World War III. The war in Ukraine, the 12-day war in the Middle East, tensions over Taiwan, Venezuela, all of these are battles in a broader world war. And it's a war between the backers of the standard Western, rules-based international order, as they would call it, and the BRICS countries and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which are sort of fusing, led predominantly by China and Russia. And The latter, BRICS SEO, represents, you know, 7 billion people, mostly, of the global south. And the sort of US dollar-based system is the G7, 700 million people, you know, the wealthy cut of the world. And so it's a fascinating thing to observe. Last thing I'll say before I turn it back to you, and we'll take it in any direction you want to go. If you read the propaganda in all of these countries, they've been saying that we're in World War III for some time, especially after the.
If you think offshore structures like where to bank, how to invest in foreign real estate, and where to set up your foreign trust are difficult or complicated, they're not. That's not the hard part of creating an international lifestyle. The hardest part is the decision to go. That's why I wrote Secrets of the Expat Adventure, to share with you a deeply personal view of what happens when you decide to cast off the chains of a normal life full of predictable outcomes. I don't want to spoil the ending for you, but you quickly discover yourself living your best life, the life you were meant to live, instead of the one you're stuck with. Across 156 pages, I'll share the incredible adventure I've enjoyed because of my decision to leave my old life behind and create an international lifestyle. I lay out for you the consequences of remaining in a life or location where everything is familiar, contrasting that with the almost magical growth and gain that is possible once you decide to take the path of adventure. There's something deeply mysterious about choosing an adventurous life. Once you commit, helpers appear, and events seem to unfold in an almost magically choreographed manner. You find yourself learning, living, and loving your life in a way that you thought you'd lost forever. There is no financial gain that compares with the recovery of the best parts of yourself. Fortunately, the decision to internationalize is also a great way to get wealthy. I give you real examples of how much easier it was for me to find and profit from the real estate and other investment opportunities I came across simply by choosing to play on the very uneven playing field of developing markets. If you're worried about what's happening in your home country and you're on the fence about whether or not you should create your own plan B, Secrets of the Expat Adventure will give you clarity and inspiration to choose your own path of freedom and adventure. I promise you'll never look at your life the same way again once you discover what an international lifestyle can do for you, your family, and your wealth. To get your copy, click the link below this video.
War in Ukraine broke out in 2022. So this is not something we invented. It's just something we've adapted by reading, you know, the 360-degree propaganda, not just the propaganda that the Western news outlets force feed most Westerners with.
That's it's such a good point. Lateral thinking, dot connecting, connections between seemingly unrelated things. This is something that I find in so many people if you have to get into, God forbid, a discussion of geopolitics or US politics or anything else, it seems very difficult for most people to sort of, not only is there a great big blank space on the map when you go outside the borders of the US here, I am making a generalization, but I don't mean to say that nobody in North America is paying attention to this, but this is a big deal, right? The recent meetings, yeah, I mean, this is as big as it sounds. And your assessment that World War III, which does not look like yet, we hope not, great big armies with tanks and bombers and things like this, although that is happening in some part of the world, that it really is about the US dollar system versus the rest, or versus BRICS and SEO. What is the significance? Come back to India and talk about that, because this is not a pawn on the chessboard, in terms of, right, their economic power and sort of their trajectory. Talk about some of what is happening in India and what happened recently, or what you speculate might have happened in the limousine meeting with Modi and Putin, especially.
Well, look, let's take a step back. Trump's tariffs war, right? What does BRICS stand for? Brazil, Russia, India, China, South America. Brazil, 50% tariffs. India, extra tariffs for buying, quote unquote, Russian oil and gas when Europe buys Russian oil and gas, and China buys Russian oil and gas, and you know they're not laying those similar sanctions on those countries. South America, you know, being sanctioned as well. If you think this has anything to do with trade policy or the fate of the Afrikaners, you know, this is an attack on BRICS. BRICS is a direct existential threat to the current system of power, and the U.S. sits at the apex of that system. And when you sit at the apex of that system, the last thing you want is an affront. So our view is that Trump made a catastrophic blunder. So we have mixed views on Trump, and no matter what we say about the man, we're either not supportive enough for his supporters or not critical enough to the people who despise him. But I think you can just take an objective view and say he gets bad advice sometimes. The fundamental mental model we have when appraising Donald Trump is as follows. He always assumes he has escalation dominance in any negotiation, and when he doesn't, it's pretty predictable to see that his bluff will be called. So on tariffs, he believed he had escalation dominance with China, and China's rare earths retaliation proved to him that he did not have escalation dominance. Same with Russia and Ukraine. The US does not have military escalation dominance short of nuclear war, which hopefully nobody wants. The US, let's put it this way, the US does not have traditional kinetic military escalatory dominance over Russia. It just does not. And the world sees this. China sees this. So to India, I think the Trump administration convinced themselves that India was the weak link. The US has spent decades courting India. India has, of course, played all sides, as Indian foreign policy explicitly states is their goal. And so they decided to try to break BRICS by leaning on India, by cracking India. And that has failed. Now, if you were a conspiratorial type, not that I like that word, if we just look at what's happened since they really turned up the pressure on India. You know, Iran joins BRICS in 2024. Suddenly there's a missile war in Iran. Indonesia is the largest importer of coal into India, or India imports more coal from Indonesia than any other country. India produces a lot of its own coal, but Indonesia is a very large supplier of coal to India. Indonesia joins the BRICS, and there's an attempted color revolution in Indonesia. Nepal, just a few weeks ago, right? Color revolution in Nepal, disrupting a pro-India government. And this whole H-1B visa thing, which sort of came out of nowhere, is really an attack on India. 72% of the H-1Bs issued this year went to Indian nationals, and remittances are a big part of the Indian economy. Some $35 billion flows from the US to India. Big chunk of that has to come from H-1Bs, you would think. And so there's an all-out assault on India. The World War III is not just the tanks and planes and bombs that are landing and fighting each other in Ukraine. It's also kinetic, it's hybrid, it's economic, and the U.S. declared economic war on India, and we'll see whether Modi can hold out. Wouldn't be surprised to see some political agitation in India. When the U.S. plays, they play for keeps, and so that's what's going on.
Mavericks Project is a private community focused on powerful connections, trusted information, and time-tested solutions to create and preserve wealth during our epoch of extreme change. The Mavericks Project was born out of the social, economic, and geopolitical schism that kicked off in 2020. A small band of contrarian misfits spent the lockdown years observing problems, analyzing the implications, and plotting solutions. Now, several times a year, we Mavericks get together in fun and fascinating locations to talk about solutions to the social dangers to your family's safety and how to avoid them, the increasing state surveillance and how to negate it, the rapidly declining U.S. empire and how we want to position for what's coming next, the risks to your family's generational wealth and how to protect it. If you think you have what it takes to be a Maverick, this is your chance to come make new and better friends with some of the most accomplished people you will ever meet. Join us from November 4th to 7th in Dallas, Texas for 3 unforgettable days of action, discussion, and answers. The link for the event, along with all the details, is below this video. Was the action in Nepal? You can read all kinds of speculation about who was behind. There was recent trouble in Nepal. I have a friend and colleague, Michael Yan, who does another excellent Substack, who has been to Nepal multiple times, talked about what was likely behind that. Obviously, we cannot know, but
Sure.
do you have views on it? Was that a message to Modi? Like, by
I
the way,
mean, look, you can't execute such missions in a society that isn't polarized already and doesn't have pre-existing problems. So, but it has all the hallmarks of a classic Western-driven color revolution, doesn't it? I mean, you've seen enough of these in your life. Sure looked like one. And the timing couldn't have been more coincidental.
and
And
the
so,
timing.
and the just take an example of lateral thinking, and we're talking about India. We're just two guys shooting the breeze. Nobody, nobody's gonna quote us on this. Fascinating headline hits, right? A few days ago. Pakistan and Saudi Arabia sign a mutual defense agreement. And the way that was spun in the media was that Pakistan is lending its nuclear umbrella to Saudi Arabia. Well, there's an alternative world where the US basically just gave Pakistan defense security arrangements because Saudi Arabia and the US, obviously, very long and intertwined history. Um, Saudi Arabia didn't really need Pakistani nuclear protection. It was always assumed that the U.S. would provide such protection. And so why that deal? Why now? It's being interpreted inside of India as an attack on India. So when you put it all together, um, losing India would be a pretty big deal. And we're seeing this bifurcation of the world. And India is the fulcrum right now. It's the one that is at the center of the administration's efforts.
Where do you see it going? I know you had comments in another interview that I listened to prepare for this. Where do you see it going? Modi was very quick to visit
Hmm.
China to speak to Putin. He's no dummy, obviously, like all states and like all heads of states. He's after his best interests and the best deals. And right in global politics, there are no friends, as the saying goes. There's only individual interests or the interests of the people and the nations. In whatever is best for them is what obviously matters most. And so, what was your take on the recent meetings, and where do you
Sure.
see it headed?
Look, India in particular is extremely sensitive to attacks on its sovereignty, given its history and the chaos of the independence in 1947 and the the border disputes that arose from it, Kashmir, you know, Pakistan, um, East Pakistan, which became, you know, Bangladesh, and so on. And so you have this highly sensitive culture with this ugly history of colonialism that it has proudly risen out of
And recently,
lo-
I mean, in
recently,
recent memory,
right?
yeah, it's
Like
not that
people
long.
alive can still remember it.
Yep.
And then in this presentation, we go through India through the lens of energy, and you see how Trump's demands were just impossible for India to submit to. And um, and so our view is that it all comes down to Pakistan. So if you're China, what do you want? If you're Russia and China, what do you want? You'd like for India and China to fix their border issues, which seem solvable from a distance compared to the stakes on the line. But really, what you would like is to have Pakistan and India come to some kind of a détente, bring that pressure down. They're both members of the SCO. In this presentation, we have a picture of the leaders from the meeting in China that just occurred that you referenced earlier. And they're both in the room. They're not that far from each other. Um, China has a long history of being allied with Pakistan. Um, Russia is the largest military supplier to India. Modi and Putin are known to have a very close relationship. And the US's interest in Pakistan is relatively recent, but you're seeing high level delegations, American delegations going to Pakistan. And you see this weird deal with Saudi Arabia. And so that's what we're watching. Now, there's a world where Saudi Arabia is sovereign and independent from the US, and this is all part of some broader campaign. MBS is pretty close with Putin as well. It's hard to believe that Pakistan Saudi Arabia deal happened without the Trump administration's knowledge and blessing, but who knows? That would certainly change our mental model, one that we're open to. But as it stands now, all eyes on Pakistan because that nexus of India, Pakistan, Russia, China, Indonesia, North Korea. Suddenly, if you're South Korea, you're feeling pretty isolated. If you're Japan, you're pretty concerned. Um, and so things, we haven't even talked yet about the pivot to the Western Hemisphere by the Trump administration, which I'm sure is on your list of questions. But right now, what we have, as you articulated so nicely in your opening comments, we have decades happening in weeks
Yep.
on the geopolitical front right now, and it's hardly being reported on in the traditional Western media. And when it is superficial and just puff propaganda.
Yeah, and as far as the eye can see, I mean, these are tectonic shifts, and
Correct.
these are problems that most of them, right? Most of the various interested parties and the various nations involved have some of those, like you said, the border dispute between, okay, maybe between India and Pakistan, they can work that out. But a lot of these things go really deep, and there's ill will and bad feeling. A lot of blood was shed, and right, and there's so many hotspots in the world today, and there is so much going on behind the scenes that even if you could get, let's say, less propagandized kind of reporting on it, it's still very, very hard to piece it all together. And so
Yeah.
it's I don't envy you your task. I know you're really good at it, that you guys are able to track this and a little bit be able to digest and spit something out for your readers. Everybody should be a subscriber to Doomberg, by the way, because it does help make sense. Your model is one of the best, I think, going on. We'll pivot to the West here in a second. What was I going to ask you about Russia? Russia obviously wished that it had sold more of its U.S. dollar holdings. Do you see a détente or some kind of agreement getting hammered out with the $300 billion that
Mm.
Euroclear has laid their hands on? Is that going to be worked out? Is Trump going to force the hand of the Europeans who still, I guess, custody some of that? Is that all up to the U.S., or what do you see on that
Yeah.
front? Is there any way?
So the minor correction, he did sell down U.S. Treasuries, but he still held a mountain of European debt, never assuming that they would be so foolish as to seize, well, freeze, and now mm, likely begin the act of seizing the central bank reserves of their main energy supplier.
Got it.
Because don't forget, Putin used to trade commodities, I think, right? Like he understands the importance of energy commodities to, say, the German economy. I don't think he ever imagined, or the Kremlin ever imagined, that Brussels would be so foolish from an energy perspective to impale themselves and their entire economies in this way, which they have done. Now, to your question, it's about 200 billion of European-based debt sitting at Euroclear. They're already misappropriating, I think, illegally, the interest that those assets have been accumulating and funneling that money to Ukraine. And there's now talk, the EU. Let me cut to the chase. When the war in Ukraine is over and it's clear who won, we can't see how the European Union survives in its current state. And the moment they go after those assets, you're going to see interest rates spike in France and Britain, Germany. The whole EU project is going to come apart at the seams. Even Macron was out earlier this week saying it would be chaotic to seize those assets. There's no legal basis to do what they've done already, let alone what they're contemplating to do. But it's very, very clear that Trump would like to wash his hands of the war in Ukraine, is certainly done funding it. Europe can't afford to fund it. And again, we've been saying this for a long time. Wars are hard to lose, man. Like this is why you try not to get into them.
Good reason not to start one. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Get into one. Yeah.
we made this call in a Doom Zoom last year in spring of 2024 called Sleepwalking into the Abyss. And I'm like, I think it was on slide 28. We're like, how does NATO lose this war? Right? Like we're seeing right now this whole frenzy of, I think, false flags, all across Europe, drones here. And, I saw there was some, this whole Ursula von der Leyen GPS jamming story, paper maps. I'm sure you've seen that. Turned out to be totally untrue. Um, I don't know. There's a lot of desperation in Europe to keep Trump engaged in the war, and Trump has tried to signal as much as possible that he's not going to put secondary sanctions on Russia. He can't. The U.S. cannot, in its current state, put 200% sanctions or tariffs on China and India. You just can't.
Well,
Um,
Trump apparently spoke at the UN, I guess, today.
yeah.
I did not
Hmm.
catch that. I have not seen the comments, but I did see a headline that came across when I ran up and just checked the news a couple hours ago that Trump critical of Europeans is something like this. So
Sure.
keeping the pressure
Look,
on them. But go ahead.
Europe is the biggest loser in all of this, and the European Union in particular. And by the way, like not exactly a group of people that emit confidence, when you hear them speak. I mean, talk about a bunch of amateurs. So I'll just give you some
Lightweights. Yeah.
lightweights. I mean, idiots would be
Yeah.
perhaps too strong a word, but not by much. And so I'll just give you some numbers, man. So we love the statistical review of world energy, right? Comes out every June. It's like Christmas in the summer for us here. Um, they've started pulling out data for the European Union, the 27 member states of the European Union, which notably do not include Norway and Britain. Um, those 27 member states consume 38 exajoules of hydrocarbons, coal, oil, natural gas. And they only produce like 5 or 6 exajoules. Okay. So they have to import the thrust of their energy for industry. Now, when you import energy, every economic entity from the driller to the midstreamer to the shipper to the people that receive it at the ports to the midstreamers that bring it to where it's needed, they all have to earn their cost of capital, right? And so there, to give you a sense of scale, because exajoules is not something that I'm sure you or your listeners are familiar with. Let's say 34 exajoules of imports. That's roughly the entire U.S. production of natural gas on an energy equivalence basis. Is the bill Europe has to pay before it makes anything? It's insane how the Europeans have boxed themselves into a corner where they have traded cheap, reliable pipeline gas from Russia for expensive LNG from the US, which the US will shut off at the moment gas prices in the US get too expensive. Don't kid yourself. And
Bingo.
so, and they've annoyed China, they've annoyed India, they've crushed their relationship with Russia. Um, who's Europe's friend today? Certainly not the US. After Trump totally embarrassed van der Leyen in Scotland.
So beautiful.
I mean, it's cringeworthy almost at some point. You know, it makes one wonder, but you see the European Union interfering in the sovereign elections every chance they can, denying the rightful grievances of those who are sparking a populist movement. If
Political
you,
assassination. You know,
oh, I
bunch
mean,
of AFD candidates
yeah,
mysteriously died all at once in the run
I
up to the
mean,
election. Gee,
Fico, right? Robert Fico was shot. The election was stolen in Romania. I mean, let's be very
yeah,
clear.
yeah, yeah.
Everywhere you look, so populist conservative parties win a plurality of the vote and somehow never manage to form a government. They've arrested Le Pen in France, right? Convicted
Yeah.
her.
Yeah.
Um, they're talking about banning the AFD in Germany. If Starmer ran today, he would experience an epic rout. These people are the least popular politicians in the world
Like in the
in
history of
history.
Europe.
Who,
No time comes to memory in
right.
the history of Europe where there was this much cluelessness at the top of the state institutions.
And so how can it last is my conclusion, right? I mean, it can't, that which can't go on forever usually doesn't. And I think the catastrophic defeat of Ukraine, which by the way needs to be said, is an utter catastrophe for Ukraine first and foremost,
Yep.
um, will be the end of the EU.
Well, on that happy note, I have a theory, Doomberg. I have a theory. It's very simple, right? Reality matters, and reality does win out in a lot of these situations. And what we've watched, I don't know what your view is on who blew up Nord Stream. Certainly does appear the U.S. had a hand in that. I can't see how that wouldn't be the case, but um, you know, what we're looking at is a true clusterfuck in all across the West. There is really nothing that you could point to. And Trump, and you said this too. I like this, and I think you got it from Twitter somewhere. 100 years from now, people won't believe that a guy like Trump existed, because he is such a huge, towering figure in politics. I think it's self-evident that he's not getting great advice. He certainly hasn't done and executed and completed several of the things that he ran on. Nothing new for politicians to lie and then backtrack, but these are crucial kinds of issues to get solved. And I'm not saying that it's all up to Trump and that only he can save us and all the rest. I'm not suggesting that. But the idea that Europe has so destroyed its energy, its culture, right? The whole immigration thing, and that again, right, as we watch, just double like tomorrow, you know what they're going to do? Double down again. And I don't know if you have views on that. I'm just sort of airing my own, which is that like the question here, I guess, is where does it go? Because in the end, things that can't happen won't. and sort of reality will cast the deciding vote in some of these things. Do you see an off ramp? Are we looking? I mean, is a false flag coming? I mean, what are the betting odds saying online? You know,
Yeah.
how dire is it? Because something's going to break, and it's probably going to break soon.
Yeah. So our phrase for reality matters is in the battle between platitudes and physics, physics is undefeated, right? I mean, you can't talk your way out of a physics crisis. Um, you can lie and deny and control the media and all those things, but in reality, like until the math that I explained to you about energy changes in a material way, we don't see a path out of this where Europe is better off than it went in. Um, and so one way to model Trump is that he's at war with the DC establishment also. And the Uniparty is a coalition of old school Democrats and Republicans who are not interested in Trump succeeding. And part of the reason he's not been able to get his quote unquote agenda done is because of you know, some threading of various needles that he has to do on the domestic front, especially with Congress and the courts. And so you know, we've seen some political violence in the U.S., which is pretty dastardly.
Dreadful.
And thank God, literally, that this event over the weekend, the Charlie Kirk Memorial, went off without any further political violence, because you could imagine what would have happened
You're not
if
kidding.
something had gone there. If the bullet had hit in Butler, you know. So we'll see. I think the tweet was, in 300 years, he'll be a mythical figure that no one will believe actually existed. Just listening to him at the United Nations, the clips I saw, you know, he's, whatever you think of him, he is a remarkable individual. But to your question, I'm very concerned about false flags. Very much concerned about false flags.
Feels like it's about time for one, you know?
We've had 4 or 5 attempts in the past 2 weeks.
Right, right. You're referring to drones and apparent
Yes,
Russian
all this
drones. Like,
malarkey that's
yeah,
coming out of Europe and all that. Listening to the British ambassador to the United Nations Security Council go on and on and on about how Britain would shoot down Russia. Like, in what army is Britain going to field against Russia? The leaders of Europe are deluded, is the
yeah,
only word that I would
deeply.
use. I would say at least Trump recognizes that, hey, we gave it our best shot, and Russia's a powerful country, and the sanctions haven't worked. And it's probably best if we cut a deal with Putin and Xi and focus on the Western Hemisphere. I think that's in an unfettered world where Lindsey Graham wasn't barking over on the side in Trump's ear. I think that's what Trump would prefer to do, while the U.S. retools and rebuilds its military industrial base, which it has to do before it can go around the world confronting anybody in another war.
Is that coming? Is like I mean that in two senses. Like, is Trump going to be able to pull it off? Probably not in his term. You're talking about decades long effort, right? To bring manufacturing home. I know he's closed several deals, and I know we have to watch our time here too, so we can bring it home with this. But
Sure.
is he going to be able to pull off what he's trying to pull off? Because even if he is, let's assume he is moving at the fastest pace that the DC blob allows such things to move, and with everything that he has to navigate domestically, is it realistic that we're going to see any kind of renaissance in U.S. anything, manufacturing, I guess, primarily?
The U.S. has a Trump card, and it's a significant one, small t Trump card, um, in that it is the world's largest producer of energy by a wide margin. Right. So just look at natural gas. We wrote a piece about natural gas earlier late last week, I believe it was. Um, if you just look at the U.S. natural gas pipeline infrastructure network as the world's most complicated energy machine, like natural gas in the U.S. today is $3 a million BTU. That's 15, $16 a barrel oil equivalent. We're drowning in this stuff. There's an infinite supply. If the U.S. put a floor price of $5 a million BTU, which would be $25 a barrel oil or $30 a barrel oil, pick your favorite number, production could double, right? I mean, we just have an infinite supply of natural gas,
That's insane.
and and thankfully, because um, these pipelines have been built, we have excellent midstreamer companies. Like once these things are built, they're immortal. Maintaining and expanding those pipelines are a lot easier than getting them laid down. And if you just pull up in that piece, the pipeline map that we showed, it boggles the mind.
Mm.
But that's just natural gas. The U.S. has the world's largest coal reserves. It produces by far the most oil in the world. Um, it's the piece we, by the way, is called Field of Dreams, and it was published on September 18th, just in case anybody's listening. But the social preview for that piece was the awesome economic benefit of U.S. natural gas production grinds inexorably higher. The U.S. is producing 107 BCF per day, billion cubic feet per day of natural gas. That's probably, I don't know, a little bit more than a fifth of the entire world's total. Russia's second at probably less than half that.
Wow.
Um, and, I think in a piece we said compared to Britain, the US produces 32 times more oil and gas than Britain does. Like, who's the power,
Yeah.
right? And so when you have dirt cheap natural gas, why does that matter? We come from industry. Um, there's a great little technology called cogeneration, where you burn natural gas and you boil water and you spin a turbine, you make electricity, and then you use that hot water for industrial heat. And the US has hundreds of these plants all over the country, which is an unbelievably solid foundation for manufacturers to set up.
Wow.
And and so um, I do believe that Trump can begin a meaningful change in that regard. And if J.D. Vance becomes president in 2028, Vance could complete it in his first term. There's trillions of dollars of foreign money pouring into the U.S. to circumvent Trump's trade tariffs, and the deal is a pretty good one. Okay, you invest in the U.S., you're bringing your dollars. You're not spending in the U.S. You're investing in the U.S. You get equity and be part of this giant growth machine. So if you look on, Trump's tour of the Middle East, Qatar, and all these countries, there's billions and billions and billions of dollars flowing into the U.S. right now, aligned with America's strategy to wean itself off of Chinese supply chain dependencies. The military has been ringing this bell for a very long time, and Trump, I think, is aligned with that wing of DC, the sort of the Pentagon wing, not the Wall Street banking wing, that says, efficiency is not all that matters in the corporate world, and um, we need to have be utterly independent of China because they've proven they're willing to use those weapons. I don't know why we thought they wouldn't. I mean, we wrote a piece 18
Right.
months ago called Geopolitical Warfare, where we warned that China was debasing its environment to gain geopolitical advantage. And when Trump laid tariffs on them, they played their card back. It's like, yes, it's a nice auto industry you got there. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. We're holding back our rare earths. It's
Yeah. 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 I mean, why anybody didn't think that that was coming is, of course, another head scratcher about the people in
no.
charge of our institutions. Where was I going to go with that? Well, I know we need to wrap up for to be respectful of your time. So, I mean, the US is still in the catbird seat in a number of different ways. In a really chaotic world, we have what we need to get it done. And the question remains whether or not the institutions themselves, obviously, if Gavin Newsom becomes president in 3 years and undoes all the work because we got to have wind farms or something of that nature happens, well, then I guess we will be a victim, a little bit like Europe, of our own policymakers. Um, Maybe there's reasons to be hopeful that the U.S. really does come out on top from all the big shakeup that's happening. But one thing's for certain: we're living through an incredible, incredible historical moment, and I appreciate having somebody like you to check in with. And obviously, you can go read Doomberg's work. It's very, very worthwhile. I could talk to you for hours, but the good news is I can also just go read your Substack. So
And you can
maybe
always just have me back on anytime you want to. So
fantastic. Fantastic. I really appreciate it, my friend. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today, and all the best. We'll hope to talk to you again down the road.
you bet.
Thanks, buddy.